The wedding invitation trembles in my hands, the embossed gold lettering catching the afternoon light streaming through my kitchen window. I trace my fingers over the names. Gregory Bentley and Sophia Martin cordially invite you. My ex-husband's name next to hers. The woman he left me for. The woman young enough to be our daughter. I reach for the glass of Cabernet on my counter and take a long, deliberate sip. The burgundy liquid leaves a stain on the rim, the same shade as my freshly painted lips. Setting the invitation down, I glance at my phone and the message that arrived moments before the invitation. Can I see you tonight? There's something I need to tell you. Victor Martin, Sophia's father. The man I've been secretly seeing for the past 6 months. The man whose ring now adorns my left hand, hidden beneath the counter as I type my response. Yes, your place at 8. I smile, picturing the look on Sophia's face when she discovers who her new stepmother will be. It wasn't supposed to be about revenge. At least that's what I told myself in the beginning. But as I finish my wine and set the glass down beside the invitation, I know with absolute certainty, some debts can only be repaid in kind. Months earlier, I need more time, Gregory said, his voice barely audible over the rhythmic tapping of his fingers against our kitchen table, the same table where we'd shared breakfast for 15 years. This isn't working, Claire. I stood perfectly still, watching steam rise from the pasta I'd just drained in the sink. Penny with vodka sauce, his favorite. A peace offering after 3 weeks of cold shoulders and separate bedrooms. What isn't working exactly? I asked, my back still turned to him. The marriage counselor said, I don't care what Dr. Winters said. His tapping stopped. I care that I wake up every morning next to someone I barely recognize anymore. I placed the colander down carefully, gripping the edge of the counter to steady myself. The granite felt cool beneath my fingertips, anchoring. 15 years, I whispered. 15 years, Greg. I know. We survived the miscarriages, the failed adoption, your mother's death, my father's alcoholism. I turned to face him, heat rising in my cheeks. But now what? You're bored? Having a midlife crisis? Gregory looked smaller somehow, hunched over in his chair, still wearing his suit from the office. Silver threads now dominated his temples where there had once been rich brown. When had that happened? When had we both started aging? Started drifting? It's not a midlife crisis. He sighed, dragging a hand down his face. At 52, the lines around his eyes had deepened, but he was still handsome. Still the man whose smile had made me say yes when he proposed on our 3rd date. I've met someone. The words hung in the air between us, sharp and irretrievable. A paper cut across my heart. Who? I managed to ask, though I already knew. I'd seen the signs. Late nights at the office, the new cologne, the sudden interest in his appearance. The texts he'd shielded from my view. She works at the firm. Sophia. She's an associate in corporate law. I nodded mechanically, the name settling into my consciousness like a stone dropping into still water. How old is she? Gregory looked away. 29. 29? Nearly half my age. I closed my eyes, feeling something inside me splinter and break. When I opened them again, I looked directly at him, determined not to show weakness. Does she know you're married? That you have had a wife approaching 50 who spent 15 years building a life with you? She knows, he said quietly. I've been honest with her. Honest. The word tasted bitter on my tongue. Is that what we're calling it now? I moved to the table and sat across from him, the pasta forgotten. In the silence that followed, I studied his face, searching for the man I'd married. The man who'd once promised me forever. I want a divorce, Claire, he said finally. I'm moving out tonight. Tonight? My voice broke despite my best efforts. You're leaving tonight? He nodded, a flicker of guilt crossing his features before vanishing beneath determination. I've found an apartment downtown. I'll send for my things this week. So this isn't a discussion. I felt strangely calm now, the initial shock giving way to a hollow acceptance. You've already made all the arrangements. I wanted to be prepared. Gregory reached for my hand across the table, but I pulled away. Claire, I'm sorry. You deserve someone who— Don't. I cut him off. Don't tell me what I deserve while you're walking out on our marriage for someone who was in middle school when we got married. He flinched, then straightened his shoulders. I didn't plan this, but you're choosing it, I said quietly. You're choosing her. The silence stretched between us, years of shared history collapsing into this single devastating moment. Yes, he finally answered. I am. That night, I watched from our bedroom window as Gregory loaded 2 suitcases into his BMW. The divorce papers arrived 3 days later, delivered by courier to the literary agency where I worked as a senior editor. By the time the ink dried on our settlement 6 months later, I'd lost 15 pounds, gained a therapist, and learned that Gregory had moved Sophia into his new penthouse overlooking the city. I kept our brownstone in the Chelsea district of Manhattan, the one we'd renovated together. He kept his law firm partnership, his vintage car collection, and apparently, his capacity for happiness. What I kept, buried beneath layers of grief and betrayal, was the slow-burning ember of something I'd never expected to feel. A desire for justice that felt uncomfortably close to revenge. The first meeting Victor Martin wasn't what I expected. I'd pictured Sophia's father as a mirror image of my ex-husband, polished, corporate, with that particular brand of charm that came wrapped in Italian suits and expensive cologne. But the man who walked into the Whitney Museum's cafe on a rainy Tuesday in October was something else entirely. He wore faded jeans, a navy sweater with leather patches at the elbows, and carried a worn messenger bag that had seen better decades. His silver hair was slightly too long, curling at the nape of his neck, and wire-rimmed glasses perched on a nose that had clearly been broken at least once. When he spotted me at my corner table, his smile transformed his weathered face, creating a web of laugh lines that spoke of a life fully lived. I hadn't planned this meeting. Not consciously, anyway. But when I'd overheard Sophia telling Gregory about her father's upcoming exhibition at the Whitney during a chance encounter at our mutual friend's dinner party, something had clicked into place. A curiosity. Perhaps something darker. Claire Bentley? He asked, extending a hand as he approached. His voice carried the slight rasp of someone who'd spent years lecturing in large halls. I'm Victor Martin. Thanks for reaching out about the collection. The lie I'd told via email had been simple. I was a literary agent interested in discussing a potential book about his photography collection, documenting the changing face of New York City over 4 decades. It wasn't entirely false. I was a literary agent, and his work was extraordinary. The deception lay in my identity, in the omission of my connection to his daughter and ex-husband. Thank you for making time, I said, shaking his hand. Your Vanishing Neighborhood series is remarkable. Victor settled into the chair across from me, ordering black coffee when the server appeared. It's not often someone wants to talk about 30-year-old photographs. Most people are only interested in the digital installations these days. I've always preferred things with history, I replied, watching him over the rim of my teacup. Things that have endured. He studied me with eyes the same unusual shade of amber as his daughter's, the only trait they seemed to share. Where Sophia was all sleek blonde ambition in her social media photos, Victor exuded a quiet intelligence, an authenticity that felt almost jarring in comparison. So, Ms. Bentley, tell me what you have in mind for this book proposal. For the next hour, we discussed photography, urban decay, gentrification, and the poetry of abandoned spaces. I found myself forgetting why I'd arranged the meeting, genuinely absorbed in his perspectives. His stories of documenting neighborhoods before they vanished beneath the relentless march of development. You know what fascinates me most about photography? Victor said, leaning forward. It's not about capturing what's there, it's about preserving what's about to disappear. Something in his words pierced through me. Like a memorial. Exactly. He nodded, approval warming his expression. A memorial to moments we know are fleeting. There's beauty in that impermanence, don't you think? I thought about my marriage. 15 years reduced to signatures on legal documents. I used to believe in permanence, I admitted. Now I'm not so sure anything is meant to last. Victor's expression shifted, curiosity replacing enthusiasm. That sounds like someone who's weathered a storm recently. Divorce, I said simply, surprising myself with the admission. Finalized 3 months ago. Ah. He nodded, understanding darkening his features. I've been there. 27 years of marriage, ended with a text message while I was teaching in Berlin. A text message? I couldn't hide my shock. Victor's laugh held no humor. Modern romance. I've found someone else. Don't come home early. As breakup texts go, it had a certain brutal efficiency. I'm sorry, I said, meaning it. He shrugged, the gesture somehow elegant. It was 8 years ago. Sophia took it harder than I did, to be honest. She was in college then. Idolized her mother. Sophia's name hanging between us felt dangerous, a tripwire I deliberately laid. I watched his face carefully, wondering if he knew about his daughter's relationship with my ex-husband, if he'd made the connection to my last name. Children often get caught in the crossfire, I said neutrally. Do you have children? He asked. No. The familiar ache bloomed and receded. It wasn't in the cards for us. Something in my tone must have revealed the old grief, because Victor changed the subject smoothly, returning to his photography. As we wrapped up our meeting, he suggested a follow-up conversation at his studio in Greenwich Village, where he kept his full archives. I have pieces that never made it into exhibitions, he explained, writing his address on the back of a museum postcard. If you're serious about this book concept, you should see the complete collection. I took the card, our fingers brushing. I'd like that. Walking out of the museum together, we paused under the concrete awning as rain continued to fall in sheets across the city. Victor glanced at me, a strange expression crossing his face. You know, there's something familiar about you, he said. Have we met before? Perhaps at one of my gallery openings. It was the perfect moment to come clean, to confess the real reason behind our meeting. Instead, I smiled and shook my head. I have one of those faces. Everyone says so. He seemed to accept this, raising his hand to hail a passing taxi. Before getting in, he turned back to me. Claire, one question before you go. Are you actually interested in making this book happen? Or was this meeting about something else? My heart stuttered. What do you mean? I mean, he said, his expression unreadable, that literary agents usually bring a portfolio, comparable titles, a publishing strategy. You brought curiosity and good questions, but nothing that suggests you're seriously pursuing this professionally. Heat rose in my cheeks. It's okay, he interrupted gently. Whatever your reasons, I enjoyed our conversation. The offer to see my studio still stands. No expectations, no judgments. As his taxi pulled away, I stood in the rain, water seeping through my coat. He knew something wasn't right, yet he'd extended the invitation anyway. The nascent plan that had been forming in the back of my mind, to get close to Victor as some twisted form of retribution against Sophia, suddenly felt childish. Beneath me, I told myself I wouldn't call him, wouldn't pursue this any further. I managed to keep that promise for exactly 9 days. You actually collect typewriters? I asked, running my fingers over the gleaming black keys of a 1940s Remington. Victor's studio occupied the top floor of a pre-war building in Greenwich Village. What had once been a manufacturing space now housed his photography equipment. Darkroom and a lifetime's collection of artifacts, cameras, typewriters, vintage maps of Manhattan, and shelves overflowing with books. Each one has a history, he said, watching me from his position by the large windows that bathed the space in natural light. That Remington belonged to a crime reporter for the New York Herald Tribune. She covered the Murder Inc. trials in the 40s. I pressed a key, feeling the satisfying resistance. Does it still work? Everything in here works, Victor replied, something like pride coloring his voice. I don't believe in keeping things just to look at them. Objects need purpose. It was our 3rd meeting in 3 weeks. The pretense of the book project had faded, replaced by a simpler truth. We enjoyed each other's company. Each conversation revealed new layers, new points of connection. He'd studied literature before turning to photography. I'd wanted to be a photographer before finding my place in publishing. He loved obscure jazz recordings. I collected first editions of forgotten female poets. Small symmetries that felt significant in ways I couldn't articulate. What remained unspoken was the connection to Sophia and Gregory. I'd come close to confessing several times, the words perched on the tip of my tongue, but something always held me back. Fear, perhaps, or the selfish desire to preserve this unexpected friendship untainted by the complicated reality. "I brought something for you," I said, reaching into my bag, "to thank you for showing me around today." I handed him a small package wrapped in brown paper. Victor looked surprised, then pleased as he carefully unwrapped it to reveal a first edition of Time in New England by Paul Strand and Nancy. Newhall, a photographic and literary portrait of New England that had influenced his early work. "Claire," he breathed, opening the book with reverent hands. "This is... How did you find this?" "I have my resources," I smiled, not mentioning the 3 rare bookshops I'd visited or the considerable sum I'd paid. "You mentioned it was formative for you." Victor looked up, his expression soft with wonder. "No one has given me something so thoughtful in years." A weighted silence fell between us, charged with unspoken possibilities. I became acutely aware of how close we were standing, of the afternoon light casting golden patterns across the wooden floorboards, of the faint scent of darkroom chemicals and old books that clung to him. "Victor," I began, not knowing what I wanted to say but feeling the urgent need to break the tension. "I should tell you." His phone rang, the sound jarring in the quiet studio. Victor glanced at the screen, a slight frown creasing his brow. "I'm sorry, I need to take this." "It's Sophia." The name hit me like cold water. I nodded, stepping away to examine a wall of photographs while he answered. I could hear only his side of the conversation, but it was enough. "Hey, sweetheart." "Yes, I remember." "Dinner tomorrow is fine." "Yes, I'd like to meet him." My hand froze midair, reaching toward a photograph of the Brooklyn Bridge shrouded in fog. "His name is Gregory?" Victor continued, unaware of my reaction. "Sounds like things are getting serious if you're doing the father introduction." "Of course I'll be nice." "Love you too." When he hung up, I kept my back to him, fighting to compose my expression. My heart hammered against my ribs, a caged animal sensing danger. "Sorry about that," Victor said, moving to stand beside me. "My daughter. Apparently I'm meeting her new boyfriend tomorrow night. She's been secretive about this one." I forced a smile, turning to face him. "Sounds serious." "She seems to think so." He shook his head slightly. "She's had a rough time with relationships since her mother left." "I worry about her." "How old is your daughter?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. 29, he replied, pride and concern mingling in his voice. "Brilliant girl. Corporate lawyer. Works too hard like her old man used to." "You're not working too hard anymore?" I asked, grateful for the shift in conversation. Victor's expression softened. "Let's just say I've recently been reminded there are more important things than deadlines and exhibitions." The way he looked at me then, with warmth, with intention, made something twist inside my chest. This wasn't supposed to happen. He wasn't supposed to be kind, or interesting, or someone I could genuinely care about. He was supposed to be a means to an end, a way to insert myself into Sophia's life as Gregory had inserted himself into mine. But standing there in the golden light of his studio, surrounded by the artifacts of his remarkable life, I realized I'd miscalculated badly. Whatever game I thought I was playing, my heart hadn't received the rules. "I should go," I said abruptly, gathering my coat and bag. "I have a manuscript waiting at home." Victor looked confused by my sudden shift. "Claire, is everything all right?" "Fine," I assured him, not meeting his eyes. "Just remembered a deadline." He walked me to the door, concern evident in his expression. "Will I see you again?" The question hung between us, layered with meanings neither of us was ready to articulate. I hesitated, knowing the right answer was to walk away cleanly, to end whatever this was before it became something I couldn't control. "Yes," I said instead. "You will." Outside, I leaned against the building's brick facade, closing my eyes against the setting sun. Tomorrow night, Victor would meet Gregory. Would my ex-husband recognize Victor's last name? Would he mention me? The carefully separated worlds I'd been navigating were about to collide, and I had no one to blame but myself. Yet beneath the panic and guilt, another emotion surfaced: relief. The truth would come out one way or another. And perhaps that was for the best. What I couldn't have anticipated was how quickly everything would unravel, or how completely the tables would turn. The text came at 11:43 p.m. the following night. We need to talk. Coffee tomorrow? Blue bottle on Perry St. 9 a.m. Victor's message was terse, devoid of the warmth that had characterized our previous exchanges. I stared at my phone in the darkness of my bedroom, my stomach knotting with dread. He knew. "I'll be there," I replied, not bothering with excuses or explanations. Those would come tomorrow. Sleep evaded me. I watched the hours tick by on my bedside clock, mentally rehearsing what I would say, how I would justify my deception. The truth was, I had no justification, only the messy, complicated emotions of a woman who'd been discarded after 15 years of marriage, who'd grasped at the first possibility of regaining some control. When I arrived at the coffee shop the next morning, Victor was already there, seated at a corner table with 2 untouched cups before him. He didn't smile when he saw me, didn't stand to greet me as he usually did. His face was carefully neutral, giving nothing away. I slid into the chair across from him, wrapping my cold hands around the coffee he'd ordered for me. An oat milk latte, exactly how I took it. Even now he'd remembered. "I met your ex-husband last night," he said without preamble. I nodded, not trusting my voice. "Interesting man," Victor continued, his tone measured. "Successful attorney, very attentive to my daughter. Mentioned his divorce several times." I looked up, surprised. "He talked about me?" "Not explicitly," Victor replied, studying my face. "He mentioned the amicable settlement and how freeing it was to start over. He didn't mention that his ex-wife and I had been meeting regularly for weeks." The accusation hung in the air between us. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to meet his gaze. "I should have told you." "Yes," Victor agreed quietly. "You should have. When I first contacted you, I had." I paused, struggling to articulate motivations I barely understood myself. "I had this idea that somehow, getting close to you would be a way to hurt them both, to insert myself into their perfect new life." Victor's expression remained unreadable. "Revenge, then." "That's what I told myself," I admitted. "But it stopped being about that after our first meeting. I just liked talking to you, being around you." "So you continued the deception for what reason exactly?" "Because I was ashamed," I said, the truth spilling out. "Because I knew how it would sound, how calculating and pathetic. And because I was afraid you'd want nothing to do with me if you knew." Victor was silent for a long moment, his fingers tapping against the table in a rhythm that betrayed his agitation. Finally, he spoke. "Do you know what the worst part is, Claire? I suspected something wasn't right from the beginning. Your interest in my work seemed genuine, but there was something off about the circumstances. I even Googled you after our first meeting." My breath caught. "You knew?" "I knew you were a literary agent," he said. "I knew you were recently divorced. I didn't connect you to Gregory until last night, when he mentioned his ex-wife was in publishing. Even then, I thought it might be coincidence." "When did you know for certain?" Victor's laugh was hollow. "When I mentioned you to Sophia after Gregory left." The look on her face. Shock, then recognition, then fury. "She pulled up your photo on social media. Called you manipulative, demanded to know what you wanted from me." Heat crawled up my neck, shame burning behind my eyes. "What did you tell her?" "I told her I needed to hear your side before making any judgments." He leaned forward, his voice lowering. "So here we are, Claire. What is your side? What exactly did you want from me?" The question pierced through my carefully constructed defenses. What had I wanted? Revenge? Validation? To prove I wasn't as disposable as Gregory had made me feel? Or was it simpler than that, the basic human need to be seen, to matter to someone again? When Gregory left, I began slowly. He didn't just end our marriage. He erased 15 years of my life, replaced me with someone younger, someone with more time ahead of her than behind her. Do you know what that does to you? To realize you've become replaceable? Victor's expression softened slightly, but he remained silent. I swallowed hard. I thought meeting you would give me some power back. That's the truth. But then I got to know you, and it became something else entirely, something I wasn't prepared for. Which was, I started to care about you, I said simply. And that scared me more than anything else that's happened in the past year. Victor exhaled slowly, running a hand through his silver hair. The gesture was so familiar to me now, so distinctly him, that it made my chest ache. Sophia wants me to cut all ties with you, he said finally. I nodded, resignation settling over me like a heavy cloak. I understand. She says you're using me to get back at them. I was, I admitted. At first, not anymore. Victor studied me, his amber eyes searching mine for something, truth, perhaps, or worth. What he saw there, I couldn't tell. I told her I make my own decisions, he said at last. I told her that while your initial approach was problematic, I believe people are more than their worst choices. Hope flickered, fragile and uncertain. What does that mean? It means, Victor said carefully, that I'm angry about the deception, but I'm not ready to walk away from whatever this is between us. Not without seeing where it might lead. Even knowing how it started? Even knowing how it started, he confirmed. But Claire, no more lies, no more omissions. If we're going to explore this, whatever it is, it has to be with complete honesty. I nodded, relief washing through me. Complete honesty. And you need to understand something else, Victor added, his expression turning serious. I won't be a weapon in whatever war you're fighting with your ex-husband. If that's still your motivation, even partially, tell me now. It's not, I said, realizing as I spoke that it was true. Somewhere along the way, Gregory and Sophia had receded into the background of my consciousness, replaced by thoughts of Victor, his stories, his perspective, the way his eyes crinkled when he laughed. Victor reached across the table, his hand covering mine. The simple contact sent warmth spreading through my fingers, up my arm, settling somewhere beneath my breastbone. Then perhaps we start over, he suggested. Hello, I'm Victor Martin, photographer, collector of obsolete technologies, father to a stubborn and brilliant daughter who currently hates you. Despite everything, I laughed. Hello, Victor. I'm Claire Bentley, literary agent, collector of first editions, ex-wife to the man dating your stubborn and brilliant daughter. His fingers intertwined with mine, the gesture both a question and an answer. It's complicated, he acknowledged. Extremely, I agreed. Shall we be complicated together? In that moment, looking into his eyes across the small cafe table, I made a choice to pursue something real, something honest, regardless of how it had begun. To step away from the bitterness that had been consuming me and toward whatever uncertain future might exist with this unexpected man. Yes, I said. Let's be complicated together. What neither of us realized then was just how complicated things would become, or how quickly the fragile peace we'd established would shatter. The first time I encountered Sophia and Gregory as a couple was exactly 1 month after my coffee shop conversation with Victor. We'd been seeing each other openly since then. Dinner dates, gallery openings, long walks through the city as autumn gave way to winter. Each meeting strengthened whatever was growing between us, a connection that felt both surprising and inevitable. Victor had been honest with his daughter about our relationship. Her reaction, according to him, had been a mixture of disbelief, anger, and eventually, cold acceptance. "She thinks it will burn out," he told me one evening as we shared a bottle of wine in my brownstone, "that we're both acting out some kind of revenge fantasy." "And what do you think?" I'd asked, watching him carefully. He'd considered the question, his expression thoughtful. "I think that may have been how it started, on both sides. But it's not why I'm still here." That answer had been enough for me. More than enough. But Sophia's frosty acceptance didn't prepare me for the reality of seeing them together. My ex-husband and his young girlfriend at the charity gala for the Metropolitan Museum's photography department. Victor had been invited as a contributing artist. I attended as his date. We spotted them across the grand hall, Gregory resplendent in a tailored tuxedo, Sophia gleaming in a silver column dress that accentuated her youth and beauty. When Victor waved, they made their way toward us, navigating the crowd with the confidence of people accustomed to being noticed. "Dad?" Sophia greeted, air-kissing Victor's cheek before turning her amber eyes, so like her father's, to me. "Ms. Bentley." The formal address was deliberate, establishing distance. I smiled anyway. "Sophia, lovely to see you." Gregory looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight slightly as he extended his hand to Victor. "Good to see you again, Victor. The exhibition is remarkable." "Thank you," Victor replied easily, his hand resting lightly on the small of my back. The gesture wasn't possessive but supportive, a silent reminder that I wasn't facing this moment alone. "Claire?" Gregory acknowledged me with a nod, his eyes darting between Victor and me. "You look well." "Thank you," I replied, surprised to find I meant it. "So do you." An awkward silence descended, the four of us locked in a tableau of tangled histories and complicated presents. Victor, ever the diplomat, broke the tension. "I hear congratulations are in order," he said, addressing both Gregory and Sophia. "Moving in together is a big step." Sophia's expression brightened as she looked up at Gregory. "We closed on the townhouse last week. Upper East Side near the park." "The renovations start Monday," Gregory added, clearly grateful for the safe topic. "Complete overhaul of the kitchen and master bath." "How exciting," I said, ignoring the twinge in my chest. The townhouse had been our dream once, Gregory's and mine, before we'd settled on the more modest brownstone in Chelsea. "I hope you'll save some of the original features. Those pre-war details are irreplaceable." Sophia's smile tightened. "Actually, we're going for a clean, modern aesthetic. Slate and glass throughout." Gregory's taste has evolved over the years. The implication wasn't subtle. Out with the old, in with the new. I felt Victor tense beside me but kept my expression pleasant. "Tastes do change," I agreed mildly. "What matters is creating a space that feels like home." Gregory caught my eye, something like guilt or regret flickering across his features before he looked away. "We should circulate," Sophia said abruptly, taking Gregory's arm. "Dad, we'll see you at brunch on Sunday? Your place?" Victor nodded. "Of course. Will Ms. Bentley be joining us?" Sophia asked, her tone making it clear what answer she preferred. Before Victor could respond, I interjected smoothly. "I have plans, but thank you for considering me." Relief flashed across Sophia's face before she composed herself. "Another time, then." As they walked away, Victor turned to me with a question in his eyes. "You don't have plans on Sunday?" "I do now," I said lightly. "You need time alone with your daughter, Victor. I won't come between you." He studied me for a moment before leaning down to kiss my temple. "Thank you," he murmured against my skin. "But just so you know, I'm not ashamed of us." "I won't hide you away." "I know," I assured him. "This isn't about hiding. It's about respect. Building bridges takes time." Later that night, as we stood on the steps of my brownstone, Victor held both my hands in his. "Move in with me," he said suddenly. I blinked, taken aback. "What?" "Move in with me," he repeated, his expression earnest. "My studio has more than enough space. We could convert part of it into an office for your literary work. Or if you prefer, I could move in here. I'm not particular about the where, only the who. Victor, I breathed, my heart racing. We've only been together a few months. At our age, do you really think time is the most important factor? He asked. I know what I want, Claire. I've known since that day in my studio when you gave me that book. I want to build something with you, something real, something lasting. In that moment, standing on my doorstep with snowflakes beginning to drift lazily from the December sky, I thought about choices, the ones taken from us and the ones we make for ourselves. I thought about second chances and new beginnings, about forgiveness, of others, of ourselves. Yes, I said, surprising myself with the certainty I felt. But I think we start fresh, sell both our places, find somewhere that's ours together. No ghosts. Victor's smile illuminated his entire face. He pulled me close, his warmth enveloping me against the winter chill. No ghosts, he agreed. Only future. What I didn't tell him, couldn't tell him, was that earlier that evening, while he'd been discussing his exhibit with the museum curator, I'd overheard a conversation between Sophia and Gregory that had chilled me more thoroughly than the December air ever could. She's using him, Sophia had hissed, not realizing I was on the other side of the marble column. Can't you see that? She's doing this to get back at you, at us. Maybe, Gregory had replied, his voice low. Or maybe they're genuinely good for each other. Either way, it's not our business. Not our business? Sophia's voice had risen slightly before she controlled it again. She was your wife for 15 years. Now she's sleeping with my father. It's twisted. What we did wasn't exactly straightforward either, Sophia. A pause, then her voice again, harder this time. That was different. We fell in love. This is calculated. Like the prenup you're insisting on? Gregory had asked, a new edge to his tone. Is that love or calculation? Their voices had moved away then, leaving me frozen beside the column. A champagne flute clutched too tightly in my hand. Prenup. They were getting married. And now, watching Victor's face as he talked excitedly about our future together, about the life we would build, I wondered if I was any better than Sophia believed me to be. If, beneath all my justifications and genuine feelings, part of me was still seeking some cosmic balancing of the scales. I pushed the thought away, focusing instead on the man before me, this unexpected gift the universe had given me when I'd been at my lowest. Whatever had brought us together didn't matter as much as where we were going. At least, that's what I told myself as I followed Victor inside, closing the door on the snowy night and the doubts that threatened to crystallize in my heart. June 25th. Victor read from the wedding invitation, his voice carefully neutral. That's only 3 months away. We were seated at the breakfast bar in our new apartment, a spacious corner unit in a converted factory building in Tribeca, with exposed brick walls and windows that flooded the space with light. We'd moved in together 2 months ago, after selling both our previous homes. Our belongings had merged more easily than expected, his photographs and vintage cameras, complimenting my books and art pieces as if they'd always been meant to share the same space. I took the invitation from his hands, examining the elegant script. Fast engagement? Victor nodded, stirring his coffee absently. Sophia was never one to wait once she'd made up her mind. She's always been decisive. Like her mother. The mention of his ex-wife didn't sting anymore. Over the past months, we'd shared our histories openly, the triumphs and failures, the heartbreaks and healing. I knew about his 27-year marriage to Helena, how she'd left him for a younger colleague, how the betrayal had nearly broken him. In turn, I'd told him about the miscarriages, the failed adoption attempts, the gradual erosion of my marriage to Gregory long before Sophia had entered the picture. Will you go? I asked, returning the invitation to the counter. Victor sighed, running a hand through his hair, now more silver than gray, though still thick and slightly too long. She's my daughter. Of course I'll go, I nodded, expecting this answer. I understand. She wants you to come too, Victor said, surprising me. What? He tapped the invitation where both our names were clearly printed. Look. I stared at the envelope, addressed to Mr. Victor Martin and Ms. Claire Bentley. That's unexpected. Sophia called me yesterday, Victor explained, his expression thoughtful. Said she wants to move forward as adults. Her words. Do you believe her? Victor considered the question. I believe she wants to make peace with the situation. Whether that's for her benefit or ours remains to be seen. I traced the embossed lettering with my fingertip, considering my options. Attending my ex-husband's wedding to the woman he'd left me for seemed masochistic at best, pathological at worst. Yet refusing the olive branch Sophia seemed to be extending felt equally wrong. I'll go, I decided finally. For you, and perhaps for me too, Victor's expression softened. You don't have to. I know, I said, reaching for his hand across the counter. But I think I need to. Closure, maybe. Or just moving forward, like Sophia said. Later that day, as I sorted through manuscripts at my home office, my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. Normally, I'd let unknown calls go to voicemail, but something compelled me to answer. Claire Bentley. Claire. Sophia's voice was instantly recognizable, though I'd never spoken to her directly on the phone before. It's Sophia Martin. Do you have a moment? My pulse quickened. Of course. I assume you've received the wedding invitation? Yes, I confirmed, setting down my pen. Thank you for including me. A pause, then. I'd like to meet. Just the two of us. The request took me by surprise. May I ask why? Because, Sophia said, her tone measured. If we're going to be in each other's lives, and it seems we are, then we should at least try to understand each other. Don't you think? I considered refusing, manufacturing some professional obligation. But curiosity, and perhaps a desire for resolution, won out. When and where? Tomorrow. The Russian tea room, noon. It wasn't a request, but a statement. I've made a reservation. I'll be there, I agreed, wondering what I was walking into. Good, Sophia replied simply, and hung up. The Russian tea room was exactly as I remembered it from the occasional publishing lunches I'd attended there. Opulent red booths, gleaming gold fixtures, an atmosphere of old-world elegance that felt almost theatrical. Sophia was already seated when I arrived, a glass of champagne before her despite the early hour. Claire. She stood as I approached, extending her hand formally. Up close, without Gregory or Victor as buffers, I was struck by how young she truly was, how smooth her skin, how bright her eyes. The same amber shade as her father's, but lacking the wisdom. The depth that decades of experience had carved into Victor's gaze. Thank you for meeting me, I said. Sliding into the booth across from her, Sophia signaled the waiter, ordering another champagne without asking my preference. I thought we should celebrate, she explained once he'd departed. New beginnings and all that. Is that what this is? I asked, genuinely curious. A new beginning? She studied me, her head tilted slightly. That depends on you, I think. How so? The waiter returned with my champagne, and Sophia waited until he'd gone before continuing. I've been trying to understand it, she said finally. What you want from my father? I sipped my champagne, choosing my words carefully. What Victor and I want from each other is between us, Sophia. Is it? She challenged, leaning forward. Because from where I sit, it looks suspiciously like you're using my father to get back at Gregory. And me. There it was, the accusation that had been simmering beneath the surface of every interaction since Victor and I had gone public with our relationship. I understand why you might think that, I acknowledged. The timing is, admittedly, suggestive. Suggestive, Sophia repeated, a hint of bitterness in her laugh. That's one way to put it. What would you like me to say? I asked, maintaining my composure. That I deliberately sought out your father as some elaborate revenge plot. Would that make this situation easier for you to process? Sophia's eyes narrowed. Didn't you, though? Be honest, Claire. For once. The champagne suddenly tasted too sweet, cloying on my tongue. I set the glass down, meeting her gaze directly. The truth, then. Yes. When I first contacted your father, I had ideas about somehow inserting myself into your life with Gregory. It wasn't a coherent plan so much as a desperate attempt to regain some control after having my world upended. I paused, making sure she was listening. But what happened next? Falling in love with Victor. That was never part of any plan. It was the most unexpected thing that's happened in my life. Sophia's expression remained skeptical. Love? After what, 5 months? Sometimes 5 months is enough, I replied evenly. Sometimes 15 years isn't. Time isn't always the most reliable measure of genuine connection. Something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or reluctant understanding. She reached for her champagne, taking a deliberate sip before speaking again. My father was destroyed when my mother left, she said, her voice softer now. He didn't date for years. Threw himself into his work. I've never seen him as alive as he's been these past months. I hadn't expected this admission. He makes me feel alive, too. Sophia set down her glass with careful precision. If you hurt him, if this is still some game to you, I will make you regret it. That's not a threat, it's a promise. I understand, I said, recognizing the protective impulse behind her words. I would expect nothing less from someone who loves him. Good. She straightened, smoothing an invisible wrinkle from her immaculate blouse. Now that we understand each other, there's something else I wanted to discuss. What's that? The wedding, Sophia said, her professional demeanor returning. Specifically, my father's role in it. His role? I want him to walk me down the aisle, she explained. It's important to me, but I need to know that you won't. Complicate things, I frowned. How would I complicate things? By making it about you and Gregory, she said bluntly. By turning my wedding day into some dramatic confrontation of exes. The assumption stung, but I kept my expression neutral. Sophia, whatever you may think of me, I have no interest in creating drama at your wedding. That day is about you and Gregory, not about me or my past with him. She studied me, searching for sincerity. Thank you, she said finally. I appreciate that. As our lunch progressed, we maintained a careful civility. We spoke of neutral topics, her legal career, my recent literary acquisitions, the renovation of their townhouse. It wasn't friendship, not by any measure, but it was perhaps the beginning of a truce. When the check arrived, Sophia insisted on paying. Consider it a peace offering, she said, sliding her credit card to the waiter. As we prepared to leave, she fixed me with one last penetrating look. One more thing, Claire. Gregory doesn't know. Doesn't know what? How you and my father met, she clarified. That you sought him out deliberately. I never told him. I absorbed this information with surprise. Why not? Sophia gathered her designer handbag, standing to her full height, at least 3 inches taller than me in her heels. Because it would hurt him to know you still had that kind of power, she said simply. And because, despite everything, I think you both deserve a clean slate. Don't you? She didn't wait for my answer, merely nodded a goodbye and walked away, her heels clicking rhythmically against the restaurant's floor. I remained seated, contemplating the unexpected complexity of the woman Gregory had chosen. Her fierce protectiveness, her calculated kindness, her ability to compartmentalize. In another life, we might have been friends. As I finally rose to leave, my phone buzzed with a text from Victor. How did it go with Sophia? I smiled, typing my response. Better than expected. I'll tell you everything tonight. What I wouldn't tell him, couldn't tell him, was the realization that had settled over me during that lunch. That somehow, inexplicably, the web of pain and betrayal that had entangled all 4 of us was beginning to transform into something else. Not forgiveness, exactly, but a recognition that healing didn't require forgetting. That moving forward didn't mean erasing the past, and that sometimes, the most unexpected paths lead exactly where we need to go. The day of Gregory and Sophia's wedding dawned clear and warm, a perfect late June Saturday. From our bedroom window, I could see the Hudson River gleaming in the distance, sunlight dancing across the water like scattered diamonds. Victor stood before the mirror, adjusting his tie with practiced fingers, deep blue silk against a crisp white shirt. Nervous? I asked, meeting his eyes in the reflection. He smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling. A father giving away his daughter? Terrified. I crossed the room to stand behind him, wrapping my arms around his waist and resting my cheek against his shoulder blade. You'll be perfect. Victor turned in my embrace, his hands coming to rest on my hips. Are you sure you're ready for this? It's not too late to bow out gracefully. And miss seeing you in that suit all day? I teased, smoothing his lapel. Not a chance. The truth was more complicated, of course. In the months since my lunch with Sophia, a cautious peace had developed between us. Not friendship, exactly, but a mutual respect born of our shared love for the men in our lives. We'd encountered each other at family dinners, gallery openings, even the occasional Sunday brunch at Victor's insistence. Each meeting had been civil, sometimes even pleasant. Gregory, for his part, had maintained a polite distance, cordial when we met, but careful never to engage too deeply. Whether this was out of respect for our history or discomfort with our new reality, I couldn't tell. Perhaps both. The ceremony was held at the New York Botanical Garden, in the glass-enclosed conservatory where tropical plants created a lush backdrop for the simple white chairs and flower-adorned altar. Victor had left early that morning, his father of the bride duties calling him to Sophia's side hours before the guests would arrive. I slipped into my seat near the middle of the room, close enough to see clearly, but not so close as to be conspicuous. The string quartet played softly, filling the humid air with Debussy as guests in summer finery found their places. I recognized faces from my former life with Gregory, law partners, college friends, the couple who'd lived next door to our brownstone for a decade. Some nodded in recognition. Others averted their gaze, unsure how to acknowledge the ex-wife at the wedding. I smiled serenely, comfortable in my navy silk dress, and the knowledge that I was exactly where I was meant to be. Not as Gregory's wife, but as Victor's partner. When the music changed and the guests rose, I turned with everyone else to see Sophia appear at the entrance on Victor's arm. She was radiant in a modern gown that skimmed her slender figure. Her blonde hair swept into an elegant chignon adorned with tiny white flowers. Victor walked beside her, pride evident in every line of his body, his eyes bright with barely contained emotion. As they passed my row, Sophia's gaze found mine for the briefest moment. Something passed between us, acknowledgement perhaps, or understanding. The slightest nod, and then she was moving forward again, toward Gregory, who waited at the altar, his expression a mixture of awe and joy that I recognized from our own wedding day, 15 years and a lifetime ago. The ceremony was brief but beautiful. When the officiant asked, "Who gives this woman?" Victor's voice rang clear, "I do." He placed Sophia's hand in Gregory's, leaned in to kiss his daughter's cheek, and then moved to sit in the front row. I watched the exchange of vows with a curious detachment, searching for the pain I'd expected to feel and finding instead a gentle release. The final loosening of a knot that had been slowly unraveling for months. When Gregory and Sophia were pronounced husband and wife, I applauded with genuine goodwill. At the reception in the garden's grand ballroom, I found Victor at our assigned table, deep in conversation with Gregory's mother, a formidable woman I'd always respected. She greeted me warmly as I approached. "Claire, dear," she said, rising to embrace me. "You look wonderful." "Thank you, Margaret," I replied, genuinely pleased to see her. "How's Florida treating you?" "Too hot and full of Republicans," she said with her characteristic bluntness, making Victor laugh. "But the grandchildren visit often, so I endure." We chatted easily until dinner was served, the three of us sharing stories and observations as if the complex web of relationships connecting us was the most natural thing in the world. Perhaps, in its own way, it was. After the meal, as the band began playing and couples moved to the dance floor, Victor extended his hand to me. "Dance with me?" I allowed him to lead me among the swirling pairs, his hand warm and steady against my lower back. We moved together effortlessly, as we had since the beginning, two people who had found each other at exactly the right moment. Despite all odds, look, Victor murmured, subtly directing my attention to the other side of the dance floor. Gregory and Sophia were dancing nearby, lost in their own world as newlyweds should be. As I watched, Gregory whispered something that made Sophia laugh, her head tipping back in genuine delight. They looked happy, the kind of happiness I'd once thought would be mine forever. Before life taught me that forever is never guaranteed. They make a good couple, I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. Victor's eyes were thoughtful as he studied me. You're an extraordinary woman, Claire Bentley. I smiled up at him. What makes you say that? Most people spend their lives clinging to resentments, he said. You've chosen to let yours go. Not entirely by choice, I admitted. More by necessity. Carrying all that anger was exhausting. Victor pulled me closer as the music slowed. I have something to ask you, he said, his voice suddenly serious. My heart quickened. What is it? He guided us to the edge of the dance floor, then reached into his jacket pocket. I had planned to do this differently, somewhere private. Perhaps on that trip to Santorini we've been talking about. Victor, I breathed. Realization dawning as he withdrew a small velvet box. But watching my daughter begin her new life today made me realize something. He continued. There's no perfect moment except the one you create. He opened the box to reveal a vintage emerald ring set in platinum, its green depths catching the light. This belonged to my grandmother. She was also a woman who understood that life gives second chances to those brave enough to take them. Around us, the reception continued. Music playing, guests laughing, servers circulating with champagne. But in our corner, time seemed suspended, the world narrowed to just the two of us and the question hanging between us. We've done this backward, Victor acknowledged with a smile. Met under false pretenses, moved in together after months instead of years, found each other through the most unlikely circumstances. But none of that matters compared to what we've built together? No, I agreed, my voice barely audible over the music. It doesn't. Victor took my hand, his eyes never leaving mine. Claire Bentley, will you marry me? Not to complete some cosmic circle of poetic justice, but because I love you more than I ever thought possible at this stage of life. The answer rose within me, clear and certain. Yes, I said. Not for justice or revenge or any reason except that loving you has taught me how to be whole again. As he slid the ring onto my finger, I was aware of movement nearby. Looking up, I saw Sophia and Gregory standing a few feet away, having apparently witnessed the proposal. For a suspended moment, the four of us regarded each other across the short distance, ex-husband and ex-wife, father and daughter, future husband and stepdaughter, all connected in ways none of us could have imagined. It was Sophia who broke the silence, stepping forward with Gregory's hand clasped in hers. Congratulations, she said, her voice sincere if not entirely warm. The ring is beautiful, Dad. Thank you, sweetheart, Victor replied, his arm protective around my waist. Gregory extended his hand to Victor. Congratulations to you both. As the men shook hands, Sophia's eyes met mine. It seems we're going to be family after all, she said, her expression unreadable. So it seems, I agreed. Stepmom wasn't exactly the role I imagined for you, she added, a hint of her earlier sharpness returning. I smiled, recognizing the complicated emotions behind her words. Life rarely follows the script we write for it, Sophia. Sometimes it writes a better one. Something shifted in her amber eyes, a reluctant acknowledgement, perhaps even the beginnings of acceptance. I suppose we'll find out, she said finally. As she and Gregory moved away to greet other guests, Victor turned to me with a question in his eyes. Are you all right? I looked around the ballroom, at the celebration of a marriage that had begun with the ending of my own, at the complex tapestry of relationships that had somehow woven themselves into a new pattern none of us could have predicted. I thought about the woman I had been a year ago, shattered by betrayal and consumed by thoughts of revenge. And I thought about the woman I was now, standing beside a man who had helped me rediscover joy, wearing his grandmother's ring and looking toward a future bright with possibility. Yes, I said, reaching up to touch his face. I'm better than all right. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Later that night, as we danced beneath the stars in the garden's outdoor pavilion, I caught sight of Sophia watching us from a nearby table. When our eyes met, she raised her champagne glass in a silent toast. Not quite forgiveness, perhaps, but something close to understanding. I nodded in acknowledgement, raising my own glass in return. The circle had closed. Not in revenge or retribution, but in the most unexpected way, through healing, through growth, through the recognition that sometimes the path forward leads exactly where you needed to go all along. As Victor pulled me closer, whispering plans for our own wedding in my ear, I smiled against his shoulder. My husband had left me for a younger woman. And yes, I was dating her father, now engaged to him. Soon I would indeed become Sophia's stepmother. But the story wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about redemption. About the family we create from the broken pieces of what came before. About love, in all its messy, complicated, beautiful forms. And that was a story worth living.
And that wraps up today's story. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and let's see how far these stories reach. If this story moved you or gave you chills, give it a like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. One last thing, rate the story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us bring you even better ones next time. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you being part of this storytelling journey.